They're gonna catch my checklist. That's a bad bet. Oh, we back, baby. We back. We back at South by Southwest, getting it live. FaXx, what's Gucci?
Yo, we're back. Welcome back to Never Fade, the NFT podcast. I'm your host, FaXx, with my glorious co-host, Goodmontheth, who seems like he's on a good one this morning. What's up with you, my guy?
Yeah, bro, I'm on a good one. I got no coffee in me either. We're up and at it. So, gun's gonna be blazing. Thought process is gonna be broken. Random things are gonna be said. We're gonna get some alpha leaked. I'm unhinged today, boy.
Well, I know why you're so happy. You're happy because we survived another huge fallout, another potential capitulation moment. Listen, man, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably lived through the Luna crash. You lived through the FTX rug. And then this past weekend, we had Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And that caused a crazy run on USDC because Circle had $3.3 billion in the bank, and that caused a lot of FUD, and people started pulling their money out of USDC, and we saw a depeg. And I got to tell you, Good, when that stable coin supposed to be sitting on $1 started to depeg, and it felt a little bit like, the whole Luna Terra situation, I saw the whites in the eyes of the crypto community. I'm telling you right now, if that didn't repeg like it did, you would have seen capitulation like we have never seen before. I don't think people would have been able to handle USDC failing. Fortunately for us and everybody involved, it repegged. And by Monday, the markets were rallying again. And here we're actually seeing Bitcoin and Ethereum sail above the levels that it was last week. So what a phenomenon. How are you feeling about this whole situation? What are some of your takeaways here?
There aren't a lot of options for people to go right now. And I think we saw that. We watched it unravel in 4K, It was fast because at the beginning of the week, there were rumblings of SVB. And then people were like, oh, it's just a community bank. Now, I banked with SVB in past companies, and no, it's not just a community bank. It's an ecosystem. As like SVB is a ecosystem that's wrapped around founders for equity, and payrolls tied up in there, mortgages of very affluent people are tied up in there, very gracious debt lines are tied up in there. So I knew it was going to be big. I knew getting into stables was going to be the right thing to do. I knew being in DAI was going to be the best stable to be in. But still, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I almost puked my stables at a 20% discount.
Yeah, you and a lot of other people, and it's a wild phenomenon. And I think that right now with trust in the banking system at all-time lows, the narratives of decentralized finance make more sense than ever before. And maybe that's why we're seeing some strength in the crypto space.
Yeah, I think they make sense for volatile assets and assets that are distributed and decentralized. I think it makes sense for stable coins that are decentralized. I don't think the USDC like stables is a bullish bet because it's tied to the thing that can be supported by FDIC and can be backstopped, but it isn't insured itself. It's just its reserves are insured. So it's interesting.
All right, we have Lior Messika in the studio, founder of crypto VC Eden Block, and also NFT project Mutant Cartel and Mutant Hounds. and of course, the holder of one of the grail of all grails, the mega trippy mutant Lior. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey guys, I'm doing well. How are you?
We're doing good. We appreciate your time. Before you came in the studio here, we were chatting a little bit about what happened this past week with Silicon Valley Bank, with the depegging of USDC, with what could have been another like pretty bad capitulation scenario that we kind of maybe averted here. And now we're seeing the markets rebound. We're seeing Ethereum and Bitcoin rally, and the sentiment in the space is kind of, I think, relieved. Now, from an article that I read, it sounded like, this hit close to home for you, Lior. I mean, do you have some takes here on what was going on with Silicon Valley Bank, and maybe, was Eden Block banking there? Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm very happy to say that we were not banking there. So, no, we had some of our banking partners and kind of payment facilitators were somehow reliant on signature, but we basically had zero exposure. But a lot of my portfolio companies did have some kind of exposure, much larger, much more important exposure to both signature as well as Silicon Valley, and it was quite interesting. I mean, I was talking to all of our portfolio companies for quite some time about kind of, as soon as they came to ask us, like, hey, what should we do with Silicon Valley? And we were like, just, try to stay safe, take your money away. Actually, it's really funny. Like, a lot of our portfolio founders, without checking in with each other at all, had all kind of bought crypto at the bottom, and now they're just substantially up, all because of these centralized banks failing, right? So that's all quite an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, it is a turn of events, that's for sure. I mean, last time we've had cascading bank failures, it was '08. We didn't have the ability to pop into crypto like we do today. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your thought process on where we are today with the adoption crypto's gotten, because we talked in such a negative light prior to cascading events like this, where we say Web3 needs more adoption, there's not enough, how are we going to get mainstream on? And in lieu of this event, we had the right amount of adoption to get people on chain. You gotta walk me through your thought process there and like where we are today and how that helped us navigate?
Yeah, sure. So I think the question of adoption is actually a really funny one, because I mean, it depends like which circles you really go to, but it feels like everybody wants mass adoption to happen almost like before coming up with a reason as to why mass adoption needs to happen, right? So like I see a lot of NFT founders specifically talking about like, we're going to bring our brand to 10 million people. And it's like, bro, your brand is not ready for 10 million people. It's not just that, it's like the entire infrastructure around this market, around this economy, around like what we're building is still, it's so early. And so like, I think that we should be building for quality, not necessarily quantity right now, like really coming up with use cases, applications built on the blockchain that kind of leverage decentralization in a really interesting way to deliver like true, real value, and that will scale, and I think again like that goes also to those same NFT founders. I think a lot of people try to overestimate what they're able to create by focusing on these like grand visions of like, okay, hey, even if like 5 million people buy toys of your whichever of your ape, let's say, that does not mean that, there's now 5 million. It would be great for the Bored API Club, obviously, but that's, I don't think that that's what like I'm looking for right now in this market. I'm looking for a lot more fundamental, organic growth. And so I think that this is where we are in terms of like our curve towards adoption. We're still trying to figure out what to build. I don't think that like we're at the stage even of like, oh, there it is. We found it. Now let's all adopt it. Like we're not there yet. And I think that a lot of the market sometimes gets either too impatient or just completely misrepresents what that kind of adoption curve might look like in reality.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, one of the things that gets brought up about adoption all the time is just what you were hitting on, is like everybody kind of knows when they're building their pitch decks or when they're starting something, they need distribution. And I think if I can just distill what you broke down, you're kind of saying like, putting distribution ahead of the use case is cart before the horse. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and I think that more than that, it's really just about like, it's really putting like the tech before the use case in a lot of cases. It's exactly that. It's almost foolishly so, right? And that also creates like a lot of narratives of investment, of inflated narratives in most cases, where in a lot of cases, like just investors get burnt, or when things go crazy, that it's just rampant speculation, that there's no real, or at least in a lot of cases, there's no real kind of fundamentals behind a lot of the stuff that we're looking at. And so, I think that like ultimately we should go back to basics. Like, what do we want to create here in terms of like value? What are the systems that we want to create? And ultimately, like, we're still at the experimenting level, and that should be taken with respect. Like, we shouldn't disrespect the fact that we're still figuring it out.
Yeah. And I'm out at South by Southwest right now. I'm happening in Austin. I was on a panel 2 days ago, and when I was on the panel, the person interviewing asked the question like, "Hey, are NFTs just if you want to party on a boat?" And my response to that's kind of similar to what you're saying, and in the light that, hey, you know what? It was early adopters. It was new technology. It was a new thing people ran into, and they just threw the use cases at it that they knew: access, parties, get around, build community. And it was great. But right now, I kind of put it back on the brands to say, those use cases they're up to you all, right? Text messaging was a 10-cent thing that ran up parents' bills, and it was stupid until the brands and carriers and phones all brought that to fruition with use cases. And so when you think about use cases, I know I mentioned NFTs right there, but going back to DeFi, this cascading bank failure situation is a use case for DeFi. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit about, from half your brain being a venture capitalist and the other half your brain being a Web3 crypto purist, what kind of connections are you making right now in this point in time for what we might be seeing as the first practical mainstream DeFi use case?
Yeah, so I think in terms of like, so really identifying the use case, I think that here it's less of a use case, it's more a call to action, right? Like I would categorize what we're witnessing right now, and look, like, I was talking about this with a friend just yesterday. Like, it's so 2022 to have like a crypto bank run. Now it's 2023. Like, of course, like we had to have a traditional finance bank run, right? Like, it's your money is not safe in centralized systems. That's the truth. And whether it's crypto systems that are still centralized and have single points of failure, or banks, $250 billion banks, right, that just end up kind of taking too much bond risk. I mean, like, these things happen when centralized entities are forced into, or essentially incentivized by, I believe, the wrong parameters, and or parameters that have been here forever, and we're now, with decentralization in a sense, trying to fix. And so, to your question, where DeFi comes in here is, DeFi says, hey guys, we can actually fix this by just having everything over collateralized at all times. And look, like a lot of the kind of more out there DeFi protocols are now playing around with credential systems and reputation systems and whatnot to allow for under collateralized lending. But actually, we've seen that implode within DeFi over the last 18 months here and there. And so, that's still a little bit far. And so right now, if you can embed within programmable kind of smart contracts these rules and parameters for how new financial systems can work, then you essentially you put that single point of failure risk away from your community, from your users, and the value systems that you're creating. Right? So Maker is a pretty good example of that. And so we've seen where DeFi can actually bring a lot to the table where centralized finance has failed. Now, again, going back to the question of like adoption, though, it's like, what will come first? Is it going to be like I just want to hold decentralized money thing? That's what's happening with Bitcoin right now. That's why like ledgers are so important, way before NFTs, right? And so I think like we still don't know exactly what the use case that will bring like mass adoption. It can be DeFi, it can be access to this world. It can be like a Web3 game, right? This is why we're all so passionate about Web3 gaming. This is why Yuga like basically became a Web3 gaming company within like 6 months. So we're seeing why all of this stuff is important, and we're feeling it too. And it's only a matter of seeing what eventuates in the market and the industry.
Those are great takes, and definitely appreciate getting in your mind about that. I mean, we do like to get to know our guests a little bit better. So, Lior, like going back here, like with your crypto journey, I mean, what really got you interested in crypto and NFTs to begin with? Like, where did that conviction come from?
So I've been a crypto head since like 2016. About a friend introduced me to it while we were I was still serving in the military, and ever since we've just kind of done a lot in that space. and at the time as soon as I finished my military service, and actually even before, I was managing my family office, which was operating across really just a bunch of different markets and industries. We built brands, we built companies, me and my family, and we've been operating these companies and businesses now for the last like 50 years. I was the CEO of the family office, and I was seeing this brand new industry, in a sense, kind of come to life. And I was hearing about Bitcoin and Ethereum, smart contracts and all of that stuff. And that's obviously what got me so passionate about it. And we started investing like institutionally and professionally relatively early in the space. And so at the time, I was also developing quite an extensive portfolio of venture capital investments, direct. The family office is still making plenty of direct investments into entrepreneurs, because guess what? Like, we are entrepreneurs. So we're 6 siblings, and we all kind of work together. My sister, built like an incredible jewelry brand that we've been building for the last like 15 years. My brother is building another business, and so we're all quite connected to the entrepreneurial spirit, and so it was always very easy for us to connect and allocate serious capital to early stage founders and entrepreneurs, more so than the usual, you could say, family office. And so that, especially combined with our efforts within crypto, our kind of new efforts within this uncharted territory, we were like, oh my God, like there's a real opportunity here. And this is where we put together an all-star team of investors, like incredible people, like, actually the youngest partner in Goldman Sachs history just joined us as a general partner. She ran Goldman Sachs in Israel for like many years. She sat on the global advisory board of Goldman Sachs for many years as well. We've got another just incredible investor on board who like managed billions of dollars at the largest VC in Israel. And so like we put together this incredible team, and we're like, okay, let's take crypto really seriously. And we understood that there's a fundamental issue around the infrastructure in crypto is still like, if crypto is still in its infancy, is because like there's just not enough infrastructure to make it enough not inviting enough for both developers as well as users, right? And so what we need is just like better bridges, better everything. And this is where kind of the infrastructure thesis kind of came along. We've been investing in infrastructure for the last 7 years. And yeah, like we've been running a pretty active venture capital firm called Eden Block as a result for the last, really since 2017. So that's like how I got into crypto. And being in crypto kind of 24/7 for about 6.5 years now, NFTs and the metaverse and all that became a pretty clear play and kind of involvement for me. And I found a lot of really interesting ideas there. And so that's also how I got into NFTs and the Bored Ape Yacht Club and all that. So yeah, I hope that gives you enough of a backstory there.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And we definitely are planning to talk a little bit more about Metaverse and NFTs with you. But before we do, that's pretty interesting, right? So you have this perspective that there's not enough infrastructure around the space of crypto. And so you're putting some venture capital dollars to work to be an early investor in what hopes to be, some of the building of that infrastructure. When you're looking at startups to invest in, maybe good, like how would you phrase this question for Lior? Like basically I want to ask him, like, what kind of things really gets the team at Eden Block excited when it comes to investing in infrastructure and new companies here?
Well, I think you phrased it really well. It's a great question. The stuff we get most passionate about at Eden Block are by far the people we get to work with. And I know it sounds cliche to say it, but like when you're looking at like really, really deep technology startups, when you're looking at super technical teams, you tend to understand like that the most fun, like the most solid, and especially like where the undertaking is so incredibly difficult at a technical level. Like it's not impossible, but it's just like really, really heavy. Then the only thing that you can really rely on is the quality of the people that are running the show, right? And so for us, like just the level of connection that we like to feel to our founders, and even between the co-founders. So like at when we look at those teams, like just how incredible, how amazing, and how connected are the founders to each other, and of course, like how connected are we to them? And of course, like look, like we tend to work and talk to some of the smartest people on earth, and like at the end of the day, you can only trust them to make the right moves when they need to pivot, when they need to make changes, when they need to act a certain way, right? And look, like building billion-dollar businesses is really fucking hard, right? It doesn't come in a day. And so like the best teams, I think, just pivot and are super instinctual. They know how to, make lemonade out of lemons, because that's what being a founder, especially these days, that's what being an entrepreneur really feels like. And every day you're served like lemons and you need to like make them the best out of it. And so we tend to look for people like that. But in general, I mean, I think that the vision and the kind of the use cases that a lot of these guys are working on, guys and girls that we end up backing are working on, and the amount of like value that can be created through those systems that they end up building are super, super important to us as well, right? So it's usually a mix of like the target market, the vision, and the founders behind them. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When you think about it, like the industry is so nascent, there's so many unknowns, right? So you're really looking to invest in somebody that you think has what it takes to navigate those unknowns, because that's a constant in this space is curveballs, hectic situations. So it's like, who's going to be able to navigate those situations that we don't know are ahead? And I think that's a great take, and I think somewhat inspirational too. So thank you for sharing that with us, Lior. Maybe we could pivot a little bit over to what you've been building out in the NFT space. So you've built Mutant Cartel and Mutant Hounds, and recently I saw like a pretty interesting animation, a fairly long animation of a couple of apes kind of finding their way from the other side and finding the Mutant Hound lair. And it was a pretty cool taste of what's to come. So it sounds like you're working with some pretty talented and creative people behind the scenes here who are producing these animations. And so I'd love to hear like more about, you know, some of your insights as a builder in terms of like producing engaging content, storytelling, kind of like, I guess, bridging the gap between where we are now to quote unquote the metaverse that everybody's looking forward to here. You know, what's that experience been like? What are some of the challenges? And I think some of the things you're excited about.
Oh, where to begin, man? So you said a lot there. I'll try to unpack the questions that came up. So in terms of like my journey as a builder in the space, some of the things I'm particularly excited about are the new metas that kind of pop every once in a while in this, again, growing thing that we like to call the metaverse, or, you know, the Web3 kind of, I want to call it even like the consumer side of Web3, right? Where a lot of like money gets put into, like, serious money gets invested into creators and collectors, and you know, so consumers become collectors in a sense, but it's very much, you could say, driven in that way, and so there's a lot of interesting stuff that's happening there in terms of like how we think about the experiences that we want to create. With regards to your question about this 5-minute video, yeah, it was super long, took us a while to build, and it took a lot of resources, but guess what? Like, this stuff is actually real. It's like you can actually interact with that world that we created, and hopefully, as soon as the other side is out, you'll be able to play this game. Like, you'll have that spot as a playable environment, right? And when it comes to, I guess, the experiences that I think people are now trying to provide, like, it, you know, that builders are now trying to provide to their collectors, like, I think it's something that really goes, you know, back to the digital world. Like, we understood that nobody wants a fucking fanny pack. We understood that, like, you know, I'm sorry, it's true, right? And like, sure, you can have like all these real world benefits, or I can send you like you know, tickets to a concert, but nobody gives a shit, right? Like, what you got involved in is this, you know, this identity. What you bought is an identity in a digital world that provides you access to creators in this new world, right? And so I think that the more we stick to that, and the more we stick to that, okay, like, let's create this metaverse, like, let's actually give it some meaning, let's give it some life. Otherwise, like, all of our JPEGs are worth nothing, right? And so that's really our plan. Like, with everything that we've worked on and showed so far with regards to the other side and like our integrations there, that's what we're shooting for.
Yeah, Lior, I think you bring up a really good point. I mean, what you kind of say, you know, what you kind of say in that sentence there is you kind of say, like, screw the utility, right? It's not about utility, but it's about engaging in the emergence, if I were to boil that down, where you are engaging in this digital world, this digital identity, and you get to have some engagement with the community. And I think a theme that is like really an undertone with projects, and not a lot of people are saying it, is this idea of emergence, and this idea of the fact that, you know, mutant hounds can set the framework, they can set the guidance, they can set the guideposts, but it's your community that's going to take the baton and drive it. Does that kind of align with what you're aiming for?
Yeah, broadly, yes. I would say that, like, I wouldn't say like screw utility, because I just say let's switch the meaning. Let's continue to define what utility means, right? Let's give it a better definition as we move forward. And I think that, again, in that sense, it's more about like the digital world. It's more about like what living your life on Twitter right now, right? And potentially in the other side, and, you know, on Ethereum or all these other EVMs, right? Feels like that's the main question. And so providing like all these utilities and somewhat bringing them on chain is something that I think more and more NFT projects and builders are going to do. And that's what we're trying to also create. So any experience, and yeah, you said it. So like this concept of emergence, I think you called it, right? Is this idea that, like, at least to me, you know, what that means for us is, as builders, is like we try to create these experiences that ultimately are fucking dope on one side, but also contribute to that broader universe and that broader thesis for us, which is like digital only. And anything that you get like in the real world is actually worth it. Like, again, fanny pack versus, like, you know, stay at a 6-star hotel, you know, everything paid for because you got lucky, right? Is there a difference? Yes. And you probably like want to do the latter than the former, right? By staking your NFT for like a year, right? Even if there's less chances of you getting that. But like, so in terms of like creating experiences of the real world, I think they need to be extremely potent. And in the digital world, they need to be sprawling. So, and back to the utility versus value point, I think you're right, Goodmonth. The idea is create experiences and stories and projects that like people want to get involved in deeply, and then that utility will come and will be actually created by the community, right? And I think that touches on that topic of emergence, because it comes organically. And I think that, you know, just let's look back to what the Bored Ape Yacht Club creators wanted to do when they sold out. Like, they had no idea what kind of utility, you know, these apes would have today, and 90% of that was guided by the community. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. And you know, something, Lior, I'm going to go back to the beginning of the podcast for a minute. You said something that really hit with me in a real different way when we were talking about the banks and centralization. You used the word community. And I've been in this space for a while. I've used community a lot. I've never once thought about how everybody who cares to spend, hold, or speculate on the US dollar is a part of a community. And that I had to call that out. I wish I would have brought it up when it happened, but it ties into what you just said with, you know, the Bored Ape Yacht Club and the community driving that. You know, it was emergent. It's them bringing those guideposts and driving forward the ideas, and Bored Ape Yacht Club and Yuga kind of cherry picking what they vibed with, and they basically gave the stamp of approval. And even going full circle, like digital identity, you got an M3 trippy. I want to dig into that. I want to talk about the story of the hunt there. I want to talk about what that means to you as someone who holds it. You and I have also been in the same kind of trait collections. I had a Bluebeams. When you went on the Bluebeams buying spree, I switched over. I swapped my Bluebeams for a trippy when you hit that M3 trippy. So we've been toiling in this trade base. I've never spoke to you before. I've seen you on the TLs. I'm in group chats with you. And it's just weird how you can feel like a part of a community based off trade based without having that communication. So it's cool to be able to have this conversation with that background. But I want to hear from you as we're in this Bored Ape Yacht Club topic, the M3. Like, break that experience down for me. What does that trippy mean to you? And where does it kind of take you mentally?
Oh, fuck. Wow. What a loaded question. I think, so the Mega Trippy for me, like, I have a long history with it, okay? When the cartel was just, like, popping up, we held this incrable event.
Sorry, for our listeners, we're talking mutant cartel. We don't want
Yeah. Nothing else. We're actually just a bunch of nerds who like JPEGs and, you know, overpriced merchandise. That's, but yeah, I mean, in terms of that story, like we revealed it at the Mutant Cartel. So, two buddies of mine who used to co-own it, Guy Benarty and an OXB1, you know, were very, very happy with us kind of hosting the reveal of it. We made a pretty dope piece of art that showed you could say the ritual taking place, and that actually led to a bunch of other communities to be inspired by the art. You know, leading up to the event, everybody kind of like wore a cloak based, you know, because of that art. And then Applied Primates, I'm sure you know them, like they adopted, you know, like that, essentially that area that entire like room for their mega gold reveal, right? So that entire story to me was always like super personal, and I felt like when the mega trippy got revealed, I was like, oh my god, this is by far the best mega mutants in the collection, at least in my opinion, right? And so a year ago, I had, a year after that, and around a year ago, I had the incredible opportunity to trade up to it by taking like one of the really like some of the biggest apes in my collection and a bunch of ETH, and a couple of other undisclosed details you could say, that went into that trade. It was a very like, it had multiple steps, multiple layers. It was crazy. Just getting the deal done took us maybe just 6 months. I feel like I talked to the guys about acquiring it like months into me actually acquiring it. You know what I mean? Like, it took a while, but we finally fucking made it, right? And then Scylla was born. The Mega Hound, the corresponding Mega Hound, the Trippy Hound, and then the Mutant Hounds rose, and the rest is history. But no, it's beautiful. I mean, like, look, I love the story associated with it. Like, it's by far my biggest investment in the collection. I always loved mutants, so it only made sense for me to rock Mega Mutant, And I know, man, like, dude, like Bored Ape, like trippy Bored Apes are beautiful, especially the blue beams. Good, you always had the dope apes. I know that for sure. But I had to rep the mutants.
Yeah. I mean, you repped it, and you rep it well, man. Every time I see that mega, it's just wet. It's just dripping in trippiness, man. It's a great look. I love it.
Yeah, and you put respect on the mutant ape name. I'm a mutant ape M2 holder, and we're always just kind of like little brother vibes, at the end of the day. But you, with the mutant cartel and the vibes of the mega mutant, definitely put some respect on mutant ape name. So with that, I have a question for you. You can see I'm a Kobe Bryant fan. And so, about Mamba mentality. Is there a such thing as mega mutant mentality, Lior?
Fuck. I don't know. I never thought about it this way, but I mean, I've got my mentality, and it's just like work till you fucking drop, at least in your 20s, right? And that's where I'm at. And, I think that there's a lot to do right now. And so if there's any, I don't know what Kobe Bryant says, rest his soul, and exactly what the Mamba mentality proclaims. But for me, it's like, just fucking work hard, and you'll do some really cool shit, especially if you just like love what you're doing. And so for me, I guess that would be the mega mutant mentality. But I see the cool thing is, like, in this space, everybody's got this mentality. Like, you guys have this mentality. You embody that statement. You guys are pulling off some incredible conversations, and it's been awesome seeing you FaXx kind of rise through the ranks of the mutants, and you Good. I mean, gosh, the grails you've been collecting, right? So and obviously you've been doing way more than that in the space. You're doing this and much more. So I think we all share that mentality, and that's what's so special about the space.
I think that's a good point. I think like in Web3, or people who, I don't know, like that's a good point, dude. A lot of people around here like are grinding, man. Like, they are not playing. Like, we are on a mission, I feel like, collectively, and like failure is not an option. This is why people get so fired up when they see some green on the charts, because like we've been tested out here. Like, we've been tested. Our resolve has been tested. We've been called like ridiculous for collecting these JPEGs and storing this much value in them. But it's like, if you're still here, man, it's because you believe in something for real. And I can say that this narrative right now, with what's going on with the banking system, and this whole narrative of like decentralization, decentralizing finance, storing value on chain, banking on chain, it's more alive than it's ever been. irrespective of where we're at with the prices of these coins.
Yeah. And one of the things too, I always like in these moments of time, I'm the way I'm kind of wired is when things are red, I sit more comfy when things are red. When things are green, I'm a little bit more jittery. But I always have to sit back and I always have to think about like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the original lore to it, the original thing that it was all about was we're gonna put our money into crypto, we're getting so rich we're gonna be bored. And you think about it, like those images look bored today, they're boring right now. But you think about what they had to go through to get there, and sometimes I'll just pop those things up. I'll look at those images and I'll just embody the journey they had to go through to get bored. So
yeah, man. And look, dude, I mean, to your point, like everybody who's supposed to, not be around anymore, like they fucked off, like AI took off, so now that's the next hype. Like there's no like there's no more, sure, like there's a little bit of grifters everywhere, so we still got those here, but I mean mostly you've got people that really, really care about this space, that really care about the ideals, the values around the space, and also people who are dedicated to building something or partaking in whatever's happening in a meaningful way. Because look, like it doesn't pay to be in crypto right now. Sure, I mean like it's still fine, but it's not AI. It's not like the next big thing, or at least it doesn't seem to be. To most people, and to us it is though. Like we understand it, and I think that's created, like that is going to create the dopest companies next year and the year after that, because like we've all stayed, we've all stuck around, and when the money comes back and when the excitement comes back, because it obviously will, and when more proof points are made, a lot of really, really interesting companies and use cases and systems will be built. And I'm super, super excited for that. Now, in terms of like, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to double down on a point you make. And as someone who's, with the investor lens, I think it's really important for people to hear it from you. There are better places to make money right now. Like if you want to make money, there are better places to make it outside of crypto. And I think you really nail that point, is that this is a point in time where we've had the most bodies adopting crypto with the most passion in those bodies, because of what the space has gone through and what it's building. So I just wanted to add on to that and emphasize it.
No, I love that. Yeah. So it's not just about the adoption, it's about like the passion of that adoption. And that's like the ratio of passion to adopters has been at an all-time high. Like I know that for a fact because of the people that I speak to, because of like, my team was just at ETH Denver. I was elsewhere. I was actually sick as a dog in New York, and then got to Miami, which was way better, surprisingly. But yeah, but in general, like everybody who's around, everybody who's made it there, like they care about this space. It's their life. Right now, like you both also sitting here, like this is your entire being. You're dedicated to this, and I think that's super powerful. Like there's not a lot of industries, like there's not a lot of like marketers, right? Like or bankers that like go so hard for their industry, for their place in the world, for their communities and whatnot, and I think that's really powerful. So if anything, like if you're ever feeling down, just look at that and you'll be bullish, like in an instant, because it that's what it should do to you, because it's true. It's very meaningful.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Because like we know like the banker's schedule is like one of the softest schedules like in any industry, right? But conversely, crypto is like 24/7, right? Like so sometimes you got to check what's going on in your sleep, It's like that hectic, but it's kind of like that 24/7 mentality too that goes behind, I think, the people who are passionate about this. And so like there's some parallels there, right? Like between the banker's schedule and like the crypto trader's schedule here. And so I think there's something to that. So these are some interesting conversations and great takes. Before we let you go, Lior, where would you like to see kind of Web3 go from here?
I believe that Web3 is stepping in a really, really interesting direction. This year, we'll go back to basics on one hand, but we'll also see a lot of other interesting pockets of value kind of come to life. One of them is, I think notably, is Web3 Gaming, right? Not play to earn, none of that bullshit. And that's what, by the way, I mean, like, that's what we're building, right? So in-house, Novel Labs is, and we've already stated this openly, like, we're working on a game, right? Like, we're working on a full-blown, like, Web3 game.
Hold on, let me stop you though, because so what's your beef with play to earn? It sounds like that play to earn concept left a taste in your mouth here. What do you mean by that?
Like, I usually play to spend, right? Like, why, like, think about your most favorite games, right? You've usually just spent on those games. Like, I don't know about you, but I've spent at least thousands of dollars throughout my life buying, like, WoW Gold, okay? I've never, like, made money from playing my favorite game. That's not how it works. And I think that, like, going back to free-to-play games that are super addictive and, like, very, very fun, grossing the most amount of money in the entire gaming industry, what does that mean? That means, like, people like to spend money on their games because, like, if you're familiar with the free-to-play model, like, you pay for power-ups and for items and whatnot, right? And so that actually resembles the NFT metas of that we're perpetuating today in a much better way than, like, playing something and getting paid to play that, because that's just not sustainable, right? So that's why, like, Axie Infinity died. That's why a lot of these, like, more financially oriented, like, play to earn games don't work. And by the way, like, you take successful financial Web3 games, financially oriented, right? Like, you've got the other side on one side, and then you have, like, the Wolf game on the drastically other side, right? So Wolf game has been really successful, but it's not, like, free to play. You can win, but you can also lose, right? And that's what makes the game so important, so interesting. And sure, you have the wool and the currencies and all these things, but, like, at the atomic level, play to earn never made sense. And sure, like, it makes sense when markets are pumping and everybody feels comfortable changing, like, local currencies to Axie, like, love potions. You know about that, right? Like, in the Philippines, like, you'd have, like, entire like parts of cities, or you would be able to transact with, like, your Axie money, right? Because so many people were playing Axie. Now, an Axie economy going down because of, like, unsustainable practices and fundamentals, that's bad for, like, people out there in the Philippines that are, like, quitting their jobs to, like, start playing Axie and thinking that that's the next sustainable future, right? Like, that was not the case, obviously. And so, when you look at, like, these systems, you need to, number one, make money, like, to create value, or actually create value first. Number two, extract value if you're smart. And number three, like, decide whether or not to decentralize that value creation system. And that's your prerogative, like, that we're not there yet where everything needs to be decentralized. Everything needs to be a DAO. Like, I wouldn't want Yuga Labs to be a DAO. But anyways, the point is, I think that games are supposed to be played because they're fun, and they need to make you want to spend rather than want to earn. And of course, if the game is really dope, then whatever you end up crafting and creating and getting from a game that you end up playing in Web3, yeah, that's going to be worth a lot of money. Like, that economy is worth a lot of money. But so you could play and then earn. You could play and earn, but it never should have been play to earn, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
it's play and craft, play and create, play and grail,
play, receive. Like, sure, like, if you hey man, like, if you play a game and you get all the power ups and you do everything you need to do, and you get this, like, super rare item, and it's got some kind of utility within the game or even within, like, the broader ecosystem that these NFT creators are going with, that's really valuable. Guess what? Like, I remember a key getting sold for how much? What was it, like, 1.2 million or 1.6 million, whatever it was. Like, that's it. So I'm thinking in that direction. Like, people are gonna, like, create those systems just like a Web2 game is, except it's gonna be on, like, Web3 rails, and that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I guess, like, the big point is this idea of being able to earn just by like playing doesn't make sense. It's kind of a pipe dream. Like there has to be a situation where either you're playing for enjoyment, or if you're a highly skilled player, you're earning because you're winning, right? So if you look at any of the other examples, many parallels to this, like daily fantasy sports, right? It's as if like if everybody that played just because they played won. No, it doesn't make sense, because there's players, there's a prize pool, and then the people who, select the right lineups or perform in whatever way is necessary in order to win that week, they take some of that prize pool home. So yeah, it makes a lot more sense when you look at it that way. I think that's an important distinction, because I didn't realize, like in the Philippines, that there was actually economies based off of the coin from the Axie Infinity game.
Bro, you could buy bananas with like smooth love potion at the store. It was crazy, right? Because it made sense. Because what would you rather do? Like play a game, and get paid to play it, and earn like an equivalent salary to working in a bank, like in the Philippines. Like at a certain point, that was actually making more money than some doctors were making in some areas of the Philippines. Like that's crazy, right? So if you either make that sustainable, or like people will suffer, and that sucks.
Yeah, it was not sustainable. So obviously, that unwinded, and people did suffer, I imagine, out there. And so kind of the point is like, if we're gonna play in Web3 games, in order to win, there's gonna have to be like strategy. There's gonna have to be some skill based or something. And I know
FaXx. There's gonna have to be depth. Okay, that's what there's gonna have to be. I think like we're not scratching like we haven't created deep experiences. Remember, like all we have right now, what most collections have, is a bunch of 2D art that was like randomly generated. Sure, that's cool. It's dope. Like if the art fucks, that's amazing, man. But guess what? That's all we have right now. There's no depth, right? And I think that like that's what Yuga's trying to, really spearhead. Like they're trying to bring depth. They're trying to bring stories. That's what 10KTF has done. That's why, they ended up joining Yuga, right? That's what we're trying to do, right? With Sarah, with gosh, I almost gave too much alpha. With Novel Labs and the Mutant Cartel, right? So a lot of what we're trying to do is essentially bring depth to the space with, different experiences, games, systems, and stuff that like people actually want to be a part of, right? So stories that actually make sense. And sure, maybe like Mutant Hounds as a story doesn't make, sense for you. Cool, that's cool. But like at least the fundamentals and the people that do show up for shit like that will be there. And we're going to deliver for them. And I think that like everybody, I mean, I'm a holder and of many, many, many collections. And the one thing that I always ask for is just like more depth, like more, just give me content that I can rely on. Give me like stuff that I can really get excited about. And sure, it's going to take some time to really get those experiences perfect, but like that's what we have right now in like Web2 gaming. That's what we have in like Web2 brands. Like how dope is Star Wars, right? Like show me a Star Wars level story in NFTs. They're non-existent. And until that like, that next Star Wars story doesn't like, isn't born in NFTs, then we still have a lot of searching to do. Of course, like right now I have my chips on Yuga being able to create something similar to Disney or Lucasfilms in terms of like original IP and depth and stories and experiences, right? I mean, they have like games. They have they just teased this thing called Legends of the Morrow. We have no idea what that is, but like, it sounds dope, right? So I think that like that's what we're looking for in the space. And it's going to come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, but depth is usually the thing that is on the underlying, I think, conveyor of value. Like let's take, I think FaXx, just like, as a good example, let's take Jack, right? Like Jack's created something that has a ton of depth and that people can really like play with, and get lost in. And it's experiential. It's not even like a PFP, right? It's like, it's an art experiment. It's like playing with your attention. It's doing all these things. It's capturing your attention. It's captivating. And I think that that's something that like we need, like the minute you have like 20 Jacks entering the space, and all creating really, really dope stuff, I think that we'll be in a completely different place. So I hope and I see for the space, like, to your question, I think that we'll start building a lot more depth as an industry, and at least at like the consumer level side of like Web3 NFTs, all of that. And then like, there'll be a lot more advancements around infrastructure that are crucial for the other side, for the builders to actually create the stuff that they want to create. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and it's challenging because what you're saying makes a ton of sense, but with the market the market like wants easy gains. Like that's the reality, right? They want some easy way to make money. Within there's people, and again, like a lot of those people probably got shook out, in 2022. And I think we are starting at a point here where a lot of the people who do want that depth and do want to stick around for those more engaging experiences are present. And hopefully, as we onboard more people into the space, we'll show them the way, right? We'll be like, yes, maybe there's going to be some easy gains here and there, but the reality is like, we want to get deeper here. And so I think that's a good point. But it's like, we're so early. I think that's the reality, right? And we have to deal with some of the pains of being early. But it does sound exciting to me that, with your kind of perspective and your experience, like when other side does become a playable experience, Mutant Cartel and Hounds and what you're building, is going to be an early adopter of providing, experiences within that. So I love that. With that, Lior, I really appreciate your time today. Any other, final departing words here or thoughts before we sign off today?
No, thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to finally meet up with you, FaXx, and see you and chat with you. Sorry that I couldn't make this camera work. Next time I will. And yeah, I think you guys are doing an amazing work and talking to the right people and saying the right things and asking the right questions. And it's a pleasure to be here. Best of luck with growing this platform out. I already see just that it's exploding, so it's great. And yeah, I think ultimately right now we're in a time where the builders are coming out and the kind of the speculators, the fakes are being shaken out. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, and I'm happy that we could get this like trippy fur reunion going here. The reality
That's right.
The reality is that Goodmonth has like, in my opinion, like one of the best apes in the entire collection. And then of course, Lior, you're one of the only people on this planet that, hate to say it good, but might trump it with that mega trippy.
Hey, I'll take an L. I'll take an L to that trippy looking wetness, man. I'll take that L any day.
But hey, man, we can start a family.
That's kind of the idea here, right? Like someone like yourself, Lior, getting to have opportunity to get into your mind a little bit with your experience and your perspectives. And we know you're here to stay, and that's why we invited you on the show. And hopefully, like you mentioned, we can loop back around and get updated takes and updates on what you're working on in the future. So absolutely looking forward to that. Thank you again so much for your time and your input. And we'll definitely connect on the timeline, and we'll be watching, our listeners will be watching what you're working on here. So thanks again. And much love, my guy. Look, that concludes this episode of Never Fade, the NFT podcast.
Verifying everything.
That's a bad bet if the bags check less. About to burn back to back, flipping that G when that Jenny duh hits. That's the race to 250 in the world, and you chose to sleep. That's a bad bet if you wake up checkless. No more people without bags.